Welcome to Midnight Whispers, your home for calming sleeping stories, where moonlit words and gentle whispers guide you into peaceful dreams. The waterfall was not just a sight to behold. It was a world of its own, a universe contained within the rhythmic crashing of water against rock, the mist curling in delicate threads through the forest air, and the subtle hum that seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of existence. The clearing that opened before the cascade was like a cathedral of nature, vast and yet intimate, its ceiling made of arching branches through which sunlight poured in fragments, catching droplets of spray and turning them into a shifting prism of color. Anyone who came here could feel it. The sense of something ancient, sacred, and kind, as though the waterfall had been singing to him long before any footstep ever dared enter this sanctuary. To sit here was to feel the weight of the world fall away, as though every thought, every burden, every knot of tension unraveled in the presence of that ceaseless song. The rocks surrounding the pool at the base of the waterfall were softened by moss, a carpet of velvet greens, inviting the weary to rest upon them. Birds dipped low, their wings catching the mist, and dragonflies darted across the surface of the water, their iridescent bodies catching sparks of light. The forest floor was cool beneath the feet, strewn with fallen leaves that released a faint, earthy perfume when touched. And somewhere in the hush between the surging waves and the calls of hidden animals, there was a silence deeper than words, a silence that did not demand stillness but offered it, like a gift freely given. For those who sought escape from the restlessness of the world, here was the answer. Soft, flowing, and eternal. The waterfall sang not with words but with presence, and to listen was to feel as if one was being slowly, lovingly rewritten from the inside out. The gentle thunder of its waters became a heartbeat, steady and unwavering, until the listener's own pulse seemed to synchronize with its rhythm. Time blurred here. Morning could melt into afternoon, and the difference would be noticed only by the angle of the light as it drifted across the pool. Each glimmer was a new painting upon the rippling canvas of water, every breeze another stanza of the endless song. And in that serenity, in the embrace of falling water and rising mist, one could rest. Not simply in body, but in soul, as though at last returned to a place that had always been waiting. The traveler who stumbled into this sanctuary had not meant to find it. He had been following no map, only the quiet pull of instinct that drew him deeper into the forest with each step. His journey had begun in noise, the clamor of distant villages, the rattling of carts, the hum of countless voices that seemed to pile upon one another until his mind felt like a marketplace of unending chatter. For weeks he had sought silence, but silence in the world of men was fleeting, broken by footsteps, interrupted by obligations, pierced by questions and demands. The forest, however, asked nothing of him. It did not judge the weariness in his stride, nor the hunger in his eyes, nor the faded cloak that clung to his shoulders with the dust of long roads. The trees simply welcomed him, parting gently as though they had been waiting, their trunks rising like pillars of ancient wisdom. With each mile he wandered, the air grew cooler, the scent of pine and damp soil richer, and the noise of the world fell further behind. When he first heard the waterfall, it was only a whisper, a faint murmur carried on the wind, like the memory of a song half forgotten. But as he walked, the sound grew fuller, more insistent, until it was all around him, weaving to the rustle of leaves and cry of birds overhead. He followed it without thought, guided by the deep, resonant promise in its voice. And then he saw it. Saw the veil of silver water pouring endlessly into the basin below. Saw the mist rising like incense from some sacred altar. Saw the light bend into rainbows that shimmered and vanished as though the air itself was alive with magic. His breath caught, and for a moment he forgot the ache in his legs, the hunger in his belly, the loneliness that had weighed upon him for so long. Here, before the song of water, he was not a wanderer, not a lost soul searching for rest, but simply a part of something greater, something vast and tender. He lowered himself onto the moss-covered rocks, their coolness seeping into his tired body, and allowed himself to be still. For the first time in what felt like years, he closed his eyes without fear of being interrupted, and the world did not rush to claim him back. Instead, it held him gently, as though the waterfall itself had arms to cradle his exhaustion. The melody of falling water wrapped around him, smoothing the sharp edges of his thoughts, unraveling the knots of his memory, until even the road behind him faded like a dream upon waking. He exhaled, slow and deep, and in that exhale he surrendered, Not to defeat, but to peace, the kind that cannot be found in cities or in gold, but only in eternal patience of nature. As the traveler rested, he began to notice the small details that gave the place its soul. The things one could never truly see in passing, but only when sitting still long enough for the world to reveal itself. A single fern leaned out from the rocks, its fronds trembling every time the mist drifted past. Tiny silver fish darted in the shallow pools, quick flashes of light that disappeared almost as soon as they appeared, like fleeting thoughts. The roots of an old tree stretched toward the water, their gnarled fingers half immersed, as though they too longed to drink from the endless flow. Above, birds sang in irregular intervals, not in harmony, but in a kind of wild conversation. Their voices layered over the waterfall's roar like notes in an unseen symphony. The traveler leaned back and let his gaze soften, no longer looking for anything in particular. And that was when the magic of the place began to sink deeper. He realized that the waterfall was not only singing to him, it was singing with everything around it. The moss, the stones, the insects buzzing in the air, even the clouds that drifted slowly across the patch of sky above the clearing. Each element contributed its own rhythm, its own whisper, until it felt as though the entire forest was alive in one continuous song. The traveler had spent much of his life searching for meaning in words, in stories passed from mouth to mouth, in books worn down by generations of readers. But here was a story told without letters, a story that spoke directly to the soul, bypassing the need for language altogether. It was a tale of persistence, of water carving stone across centuries, of roots reaching deep into the earth, of light finding a way through the smallest cracks in the canopy. It was a story of cycles, of rain becoming river, of river becoming mist, of mist rising to clouds and returning again, endless and eternal. The traveler felt himself small in the face of it, but not in a way that diminished him. Rather, he felt himself placed within the vastness, a single note in the orchestra of existence. And strangely, that made him feel less lonely than he had in years. For the first time, he was not searching for where he belonged. He already belonged here, in the quiet acceptance of nature's embrace. His hand brushed against the moss at his side, soft and damp, and he smiled faintly as if he had been greeted by an old friend. He had never known moss to feel like comfort, but in this place everything carried a kind of gentleness, a reminder that even the smallest things had their role in holding up the harmony of the world. The waterfall thundered, yet the moss whispered. The birds cried, yet the fish glided silently, and together they balanced, a truth so simple it seemed impossible he had not always understood it. Closing his eyes once more, the traveler let the song envelop him fully, no longer a visitor to this hidden place, but a listener in its choir, a guest welcomed not with words, but with presence. As the hours drifted by unnoticed, the traveler began to sense that the waterfall was more than a place. It was a teacher. Its lessons were not given in the stern voice of a master, nor inscribed in ink upon parchment, but whispered through the endless repetition of falling water. At first glance, the cascade seemed simple, water spilling over rock, crashing into the pool below. But the longer he listened, the more he understood its quiet wisdom. The waterfall did not resist its path. It simply flowed, surrendering to gravity's pull, shaping the stone not through force but through patience. It taught endurance without stubbornness, strength without violence, and transformation without losing oneself. Each drop that fell was part of something greater, yet none were forgotten. Together they made the song, but each carried its own glimmer as it fell through the sunlight. The traveler thought his own life, how often he had fought against the current, clutching desperately to what should have been released, fearing change as though it were loss. Yet here was proof that surrender was not defeat, but another form of power. The rocks, massive and unyielding, seemed indestructible, yet the water, soft and fluid, had carved them into shapes of breathtaking grace. What lesson was clearer than this? That gentleness, repeated without end, could move even mountains. He breathed in deeply, and with that breath released a memory he carried too long. A voice that told him once that he was not enough, that his wandering would never bring him peace, that the world's beauty was meant for others but not for him. That voice had echoed in his mind for years. But here, against the chorus of the waterfall, it seemed small, almost laughable. What was one bitter voice compared to the eternal hymn of water meeting stone? He let it go, imagining it carried downstream, where the river would take it far away, dissolving it into nothingness. In its place, he felt a strange lightness, a freedom he had not known since childhood. His shoulders loosened, his heartbeat slowed, and he found himself smiling, not a forced gesture, but one that rose unbidden, like sunlight breaking through clouds. The mist kissed his face, cool and refreshing, and he laughed softly, realizing that he was not alone in this lesson. Even the trees swayed in agreement, bending with the wind rather than breaking, yielding without surrendering their roots. Everything around him embodied the same truth, that life was not a battle to be won, but a flow to be joined. He sat in silence, not to escape his thoughts, but to listen more deeply, to let the wisdom of the waterfall seep into quiet chambers of his heart. It was then he understood why his journey had led him here, not by accident, but by necessity. Some roads are not walked with feet, but with longing, and his longing for rest had been answered by this sanctuary. Here, in the waterfall song, he had found not just a place to pause, but a mirror of what life could be, steady, flowing, and endlessly renewing. As twilight began to settle over the forest, the waterfall transformed once more, revealing a different face of its endless beauty. The sun, now low on the horizon, cast a golden hue across the clearing, turning the spray into drifting clouds of amber light. The traveler watched in quiet awe as the last beams of day painted the pool in shifting shades of orange and violet, as though the water itself had become liquid fire and twilight shadow, flowing together in harmony. The air grew cooler, and the chorus of the forest shifted. Daytime birds gave way to the subtle chirring of crickets, and the rustle of small nocturnal creatures stirred in the underbrush. The waterfall's voice deepened in the fading light, no longer bright and exuberant, but slow, resonant, and meditative, like the chanting of monks at evening prayer. The traveler felt the rhythm of it in his very bones, a pulse that seemed to anchor him in the present moment more securely than he had ever been anchored before. He lay back on the moss, gazing up to the branches of the sky. When the first stars blinked awake, delicate pinpricks of light scattered across the vast canvas of night. Each one shimmered as though winking at him, and he wondered if they too listened to the waterfall's song, if even the heavens paused to hear its hymn. The thought filled him with quiet joy, as though he was not just lying in a forest, but resting within the embrace of the universe itself. Fireflies began to appear, their soft glows rising and falling like tiny lanterns, flickering an unspoken rhythm of the waterfall's pulse. It was as if the night itself had joined the song, adding layers of mystery and wonder. The traveler's heart swelled, not with longing but with fullness, as though all the empty spaces inside him were being gently filled with light, sound, and peace. For so long, he had chased the idea of belonging, of finding a place or a purpose that could justify his wandering. But here, under the watch of stars and waterfall, he realized belonging was not something to be found. It was something always present, waiting to be noticed. He was part of this song, not separate from it. The trees, the stones, the river, the night, all were kin, bound by the same silent truth that life was sacred simply by existing. The traveler closed his eyes once more, listening not only with his ears but with his whole being, and as he drifted between wakefulness and dream, he felt the waterfall's voice cradle him like a lullaby, promising that he was safe, he was held, and he was finally home. Night deepened, and with it came a profound stillness, though the waterfall never ceased its eternal hymn. In the darkness, its silver cascade caught the moonlight, glowing faintly like a ribbon of liquid stars pouring from the heavens to the earth. The traveler sat upright again, drawn by the sight, and felt as though he was witnessing something otherworldly, a gateway between realms. The pool at the base reflected the moon so perfectly that it seemed as if two skies had opened, one above, one below, and he was balanced in the middle, a quiet witness to infinity. The forest around him grew hushed, save for the occasional hoo of an owl or the distant rustle of unseen creatures moving softly through the brush. Even these sounds felt like part of a larger rhythm, careful not to disturb the sanctity of the night. The traveler breathed in the crisp air, heavy with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers that only reveal their fragrance after dusk, and felt it cleanse him from within. He had known nights of fear before, nights on strange roads under uncertain skies, where every sound hinted at danger. But here there was no fear. Darkness did not threaten. It sheltered, cloaking him in its velvet embrace. The waterfall song was his guardian, a shield of sound that kept the world's troubles at bay. He realized then that rest was not just a stilling of the body, but the deep surrender of the spirit, a trust that the world would hold him gently while he laid down his burdens. As he leaned forward, dipping his hand into the cool water, he felt it wrap around his fingers like silk. He lifted it to his lips, and the taste was pure, as if he was drinking light itself. The coldness startled him, but also awakened something, an energy that coursed through his weary frame. Not sharp or overwhelming, but steady, like the renewal of breath after a long silence. He imagined how many creatures had drunk from this pool before him, deer bending their slender necks, birds alighting briefly to sip. Perhaps even generations of wanderers who, like him, had been drawn to this sacred place by longing or chance. The thought made him feel connected across time, as if unseen companions shared this rest with him, their echoes mingling with his in the waterfall's eternal song. He gazed again at the luminous curtain of water and felt a truth rise within him, that no life was wasted when it paused to listen, to truly be present with the world. Every step he had taken, every wrong turn, every sorrow had led him here, and suddenly he would not have changed a single one, for without them he would not have found this sanctuary, nor the lesson it offered. He smiled softly into the night, and for the first time in memory, he felt no urge to move on, no hunger for the next destination. The road could wait. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight, he belonged to the song of the waterfall, and it belonged to him. The traveler awoke at dawn, though he had not meant to sleep. He had drifted off gently, as though the waterfall's voice had rocked him into dreams, and now he opened his eyes to a sky brushed with pale pink and gold. The mist hung low, glowing faintly in the new light, and the air was crisp with the freshness of morning. Birds had returned to their morning chorus, their calls bright and jubilant, filling the clearing with a sense of celebration. The waterfall's song had shifted once again, brighter now, almost playful, as though greeting the day with laughter. The traveler stretched, his body sore but lighter, as if the weight he had carried for years had been washed away in the night. He wandered closer to the water's edge and watched the surface ripple with endless motion, the reflections of the trees bending and swaying with each small wave. Kneeling, he cupped his hands once more to drink, and the chill of the water sharpened his senses, filling him with energy that was calm but steady, like the steady beat of a drum. He sat there for a long while, simply watching, listening, breathing, and in that stillness came a realization. The waterfall had not changed for him. It had been here long before his arrival and would remain long after, singing its eternal hymn without pause. Yet in its constancy, he had found transformation. The world beyond the forest might clamor for progress, achievement, and endless striving, but here he learned that there was wisdom in constancy, in allowing oneself to simply be part of something steady and enduring. He thought of the countless rivers that began as raindrops, of the oceans that held the memory of every stream, of the cycles that turned without fail. His own life, he realized, was just one ripple in the vast ocean of time, fleeting yet essential, and that truth did not diminish him. It honored him. To exist, to breathe, to be alive in this moment with the song of the waterfall ringing in his ears was enough. He did not need to prove himself to the world, nor chase after approval like a shadow. Existence itself was sacred, and he had been blind to it for so long. Tears welled in his eyes, not from sorrow but from a deep well of gratitude he had never known before. He pressed his palms together and bowed slightly toward the cascade, not as a ritual he had been taught, but as a spontaneous gesture of reverence. The waterfall did not need his thanks, but offering it filled him with peace, as though he had finally learned how to say yes to life. The forest stirred gently around him, sunlight streaming to the canopy in golden shafts, and he felt that the entire world was bowing back, acknowledging his presence as part of the greater whole. In that moment, he understood that resting by the waterfall was not just a pause in his journey. It was the journey itself. When the time finally came to rise, the traveler did not feel the same urgency that had once driven him onward. The road was still there, waiting beyond the trees, but he no longer saw it as an escape or a demand. Instead, it was simply another current in the great river of life, one that he would join when he was ready. For now, he lingered in the clearing, savoring the last moments of his stay, letting the song of the waterfall carve itself deeper into his memory. He knew he could not carry the stones, the moss, or the mist with him, but he could carry the lesson. That peace was not found in arrival, but in presence. He would remember the way the water surrendered to its path without fear, how the trees bent with the wind instead of breaking, how the stars had mirrored themselves in the stillness of the pool, reminding him of infinite connection. These truths would walk with him, steadying his steps, whispering their gentle wisdom whenever the noise of the world grew too heavy. He closed his eyes and took one final breath of the cool, damp air, filling his lungs with the essence of the sanctuary. And when he opened them again, he smiled, not the weary smile of one forcing himself onward, but the genuine smile of someone who had found rest, even if only for a time. As he rose and adjusted his cloak, he felt no sorrow in leaving, for he understood now that the waterfall was not confined to this place. Its song would echo within him wherever he went, a reminder that stillness could be found even in the busiest of streets, if only he chose to listen. The forest seemed to watch him as he departed, the rustling leaves bidding him farewell, the sunlight guiding his way through the trees. And though his footsteps carried him further from the clearing, he felt no distance from the peace he had discovered. The waterfall remained behind him, yes, but it also remained within him, its eternal song woven into the fabric of his spirit. Perhaps one day he would return, or perhaps he would never see the sacred place again. It did not matter. What mattered was that he had been there, that he had listened, and that he had learned. And as he stepped back onto the winding path of the world, he carried with him the quiet certainty that he was no longer just a wanderer. He was part of the song now, endless, flowing, and free.